All right. Hello and welcome. This greetings from the Climate Change Media Hub at the Asian College of Journalism. This is supported by the Interlink Academy Germany. I am Himanshu Arya, a mentee at the Hub, and I'm delighted to be joined by the speakers of the day, but also friends and colleagues and award-winning journalists with us, Shreya Raman and Athar Parvez, both of whom are also residents of the Climate Change Media Hub. We are imagining this conversation to be a behind the scenes of a reporter's diary, trying to distill from the combined experiences of our speakers, which makes for 30 years of experience, on what makes a good story and how to tell it pretty damn well. Before we begin the session, a note for our audiences. We are reflecting on the pieces both Shreya and Athar wrote as part of this resident fellowship with Asian College of Journalism and the Interlink Academy Germany. For the familiarity of our audiences, we will also be sharing snippets from the story and putting the links on the chat in case you haven't read them already. And as I said, we intend for this to be a conversation. So may I request you to please make ample use of the chat option and drop in your thoughts, your feedbacks, your comments, and questions. We will be taking them through the course of this discussion. And without further ado, let me begin with the introductions. We have Shreya Raman, an alumna of ACJ 2017 batch. Shreya is an independent journalist. She also calls herself a data nerd. You might be already familiar with her reporting on the environment, heat wave payouts, Adivasi rights, forest rights in Bastar, ASHA workers, and women living at the intersections of disabilities. Over the last 8 years, her reportage has won her the Ladli Media Award for Gender Sensitivity, the Likho Award for Excellence in Media, and the Society for Publishers in Asia SOPA Award. Along the way, her work has also been supported by the International Center for Journalists, International Women's Foundation, and Population Reference Bureau. She has been published in a plethora of places. I'll go on and on, but there's Foreign Policy, Fuller Project, Nikki Asia, Scroll, Article 14, Behen Box, India Spend, the Third Pole. Shreya is currently joining us from Goa. And with that, we have Athar Parvez, another award-winning researcher and writer based in Kashmir. He is a journalist who also moonlights as a researcher, straddling both the world of media and academia. Over the past 20 years, Athar has been reporting on environment, health, and agriculture challenges in the Himalayan region. In 2009 and 2015, he reported from Copenhagen and Paris with a focus on implications for India, particularly the Himalayas. He's written for Reuters, Mongabay, HuffPost, Third Pole, Scroll, Down to Earth, India Spent, Wire, Kashmir Observer. Athar is currently conducting research about localized food systems in Global South through a collaboration with the University at Buffalo and State University of New York. Athar is now joining us from Kashmir. Like I said, between Shreya and Athar, we have a combined experience of 30 years, and we will be traversing a geography which goes literally from the mountain to the sea. So we're so excited to have you both join us. Shreya, will begin with you. Your stories transport us to a completely different landscape altogether. This is a land of sea, ports, coastal towns. There are creeks. In your reportage, you call them terra aqueous environment. And these are also, in some sense, no man's land, in the sense they are not governed by the government, but port trust and port authorities. If you could talk to us about witnessing the expanse of this geography, and also how did you ease into this place? Who were the first people that you were speaking to while you went to Puducherry and Gujarat? Yeah.
So I mean, this story, I think the beginning has been before I started this residency program. I have since Jan 2025 been thinking of doing something about the coastal uh, issues. And uh, I think what was interesting to me is because I come from, like, I look at it from a land perspective, right? Because I have and I was reporting a lot on forest rights and governance and policy and things like that. And it seemed like for me, it's the land exists with its boundaries, but then there's also a lack of boundary there. And I thought uh, coastal land suddenly became like an interesting aspect for me because of the way its history or the way it's been governed so far, or like it's a lack of governance, right? But who owns it and who gets to have rights over it? With forests, it's very clear because any kind of area that's governed by forest department is a forest, right? But with coastal land there is a lack of clarity in that aspect. But in such a situation, we also have we have this existing situation, but then we also have this sudden increase in attention towards the coastal land, and this sense of grabbing of coastal land for various kind of projects. Like ports are just one of them, right? There is tourism projects. Everyone wants a sea view, uh, resort, and so there is this sudden rush to claim the coastal land. And with forest it's much more difficult. With other kind of revenue land it's much more difficult, but with coastal land its diversion becomes much easier and a lot more murky for the communities involved. So that's where the idea came from, and I had gone to Gujarat even before this in September, and that's where this idea developed further, where like I think there were more and more. I think since 2024 there have been talks of this Coastal Rights Act, right? Similar to what Forest Rights Act has done for uh, forest dwelling communities and indigenous communities. So I thought it was an interesting, because I am driven a lot by policy and what drives policy changes and the spirit of a policy versus its implementation. These are the things that fascinate me. So it pretty much seemed like the right thing to focus on. And yeah, I think, does that answer your
Also,
question?
like who were the first person you met
Yeah,
before you
who are
traveled?
the first people? So like I said, when I went to Gujarat in September, I met a bunch of people there. And this was a workshop. Actually, it was a workshop for fishing communities. So it was a group of people from different coastal states who had come together and were discussing, right? Because that's the thing, right? With forest rights, because it's largely in the central India, I mean, in sense of the larger expanse of forest that we have. Of course, there are in other parts as well, but the momentum or a political movement to protect forests have emerged from there. But with coast, it's much more scattered. The communities are scattered. Even with constituencies, when you talk about political agency, um, a lot of these constituencies along the coast also include a lot of mainland. So there is not a sense of political um uh like there's no political independence or agency. So a lot of discussions were happening, like there were fishing communities leaders from Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, um Gujarat, and I think from Goa as well. So this group was there, and I was speaking to everyone, and some of the people from that group, they were researchers as well, were the first people I spoke to, and then which led me to focus on Gujarat as a situation, because there were a lot of demolitions happening there. And it was also interesting because of the connotations, and it's also Kandla port is interesting because it is a major port and its policies are different. And also I think what interested me the most was looking at the map. So the Kandla Port Authority in its one of the documents has a what is it port limit, right? And if you look at the port limit, it pretty much covers the entire of Gulf of Kutch, which is such an
I think,
eco-sensitive.
Shreya, yeah, I think we'll
So
come to that in a bit. But also for the familiarity of our audiences, Shreya did two stories, one for Article 14 and one from Bonga Bay, both connected to how people in the coastal cities live and also how communities are being wiped out because the new port-led economy has to flourish. So we'll come to that in a bit. Thanks for that, Shreya. I'll quickly move on to Athar. Athar, my question is more structural in that sense that I'm trying to understand, but like who best to ask this other than you, is for a reporter to be on a ground, especially in the context of Kashmir, how easy or difficult is it to distill or segregate environmental issues from the larger political issues? So when you're reporting on, say, the apple growers in Kashmir fighting for, their land's not being taken away. How much of it do you think is an environmental problem? How much of it is a political problem? Or does this binary exist in Kashmir at all?
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. I think I'm glad that you asked this question about the story which I did about those apple growers in South Kashmir, in the Pulwama district. So that story, that was absolutely quite interesting for me. As soon as I saw this news coming in the local, press, that these apple growers are agitating, they are doing a whole lot of things to somehow stop the government or the stop the agency which was trying to execute that project, that railway link uh, between two, regions which are very close to each other. So they were doing a lot of things, bringing in activists, protesting against the move, and doing other things also, reaching out to local these politicians, the local representatives who actually represented them in the legislative assembly. So doing a whole lot of things. So I found it quite interesting because I thought, I mean, this might be quite interesting to go and visit that place and find out from the local community what is actually happening. So when I went there, I always try to do a little profile, at least in my mind, what kind of village it is, what kind of people live there. So what is the socio-economic, what are the socio-economic realities of the particular place? So while I was listening to their stories, it was quite interesting for me that these farmers, these apple growers, they were initially they were growing. They used to grow paddy in those farms. So it was maybe some 30 years back or 25 years back until they used to do that predominantly in that in that area. But it was actually because of the scarcity of water that they had to shift from paddy to apple growing. So that quite struck me. I thought that this is an adaptation story, which, I mean, when the world was trying to learn how the adaptation strategies have to be devised, how we have to deal with the climate change. So this is one of the success stories. This is one of the community driven solution. So that was I was really stunned when I came to realize that this is how these apple growers had devised a solution. And now a project, a government driven, a government led project is actually kind of putting that apart, I mean, kind of messing up with that. So that was quite interesting for me.
Athar, just for familiarity of our audiences, Athar is talking about their report on how this 20-kilometer rail line that's going to slice through a lot of apple farms in Kashmir. Um, I think we'll put that a link on the chat as well. And it's all sort of uprooting the land the land is the only thing that Kashmiris think it's theirs, and it's uprooting that and bringing in and Kashmiris there have also said that they're not against development, but what development means for them. Athar, let me just quickly rephrase the question that I was asking because, like I said, the political versus ecological binary in Kashmir
I
is.
was actually coming to that.
Hmm.
But you can please, if you want to
Yes,
simplify it further, I'm okay with that. Please go
yeah.
ahead.
So I was just trying to understand if there is a binary that exists in Kashmir or not, or is everything political also ecological in that context?
It's very complex. It's so layered that you can't, there is no kind of I mean, you can't simply put it as a binary. I mean, it's a sort of a spectrum, I mean, I mean, how things happen here. But and it's also interesting how people try to kind of move away from the controversial aspects of a particular problem. For example, this problem, when they started agitating against the project, they were profusely saying that we are not against the development, we are not against the country, we are not against any kind of anything which is in the national interest and all that. So that tells you how people are, they have actually grown quite smart over the years, how they have to kind of navigate those challenges. how they have to convince the state that they are not there to kind of challenge their writ. They are there to just protect their own rights. So that's how they actually, dealt with that. But as far as, saying that whether, it is, besides politics or it is not politics, I mean, there are so many things to it. I mean, if you go deeper into those things, you will come to realize that people have even those theories as well. They will also say that maybe it is happening because there is a design behind that. So there is always that, subtext. But I mean, people, as I said, people are very smart to navigate those challenges. They are very smart that they should not be in any sort of a position wherein they will be in trouble. So there are ways and means for the people to kind of navigate those challenges. So that's how those people actually try to do that. And I'm very glad to share with you that my story and maybe so many other stories. I think it ultimately, I mean, it was a sort of, impact reporting in a sense. I don't know whether it is fair to claim that it was because of the reporting that the government had to withdraw the project or at least stall the project for some time. But it was ultimately done. The government did say that we are not going to, I mean, carry on with this project. We are, stalling this project. And I think there was another statement also which said that it has been, I mean, kind of withdrawn for good. But let me tell you that it was also maybe we at least perceive that it was because of the reporting and because of the maybe the activism and the local people raising their problem with the government in a very confident manner. So that's how actually they were able to put a stop to that project. And I'm really glad that I also played a bit in that. So that's how, I mean, as far as this question whether this is, I mean, how to kind of deal with the fact that if there's a lot of kind of politics. I mean, Kashmir has a history of political turmoil, and we always find ourselves in some sort of problem. So it is really, it is a bit difficult to kind of report on some issues. As I said, every issue is somehow layered in some sort of politics. But people and reporters, journalists, as well as the common people, they have found out ways and means to deal with those challenges. So I think for now, I mean, people are actually able to deal with that.
Okay, that's good to know. Shreya, will come to you. While I was reading through your stories, especially the one at Article 14, I want to talk to you also about the corroboration of evidence because I was going through each hyperlink and there are several of them. And they're also massive reports. They're court administrative reports, there are PIV reports, there are court cases, there are reportings on court cases. Explain to us the process of parsing through all these documents.
So I think research for me happens in multiple stages. There is some that happen before reporting. So like some of the more concrete evidence, like the port report, right? What's the data of the port example, things like that. I had it before, but about attribution, I would say that I feel I don't like writing statements without any evidence, right? Like, so each sentence has to be based on some evidence, and it could be data, it could be some report, or it could be my own reportage. But that attribution, I think, is essential to journalism. Otherwise, it's just an opinion piece. So I find comfort in attributing. So I do extensive research. And like I said, some of it happens before I go on the field. And while I'm on the field, I'm researching and finding new things. So, like, for example, the court case, I met someone and he told me more about it. So that's how it ended up coming into the picture. And then, like, while writing, there are a lot of gaps to be filled. So I think when it comes to when we to put evidence together, what I like to do is if someone has said something, especially numbers or some kind of a fact, it's easy to say this person said this, but it's much more important to say this is the fact. And that comes only from, looking at multiple sources and putting and finding the root source of, because if it's a number, if it's a statement, if it's a specific kind of fact that has been said, clearly it must come from something specific, right? So finding that, I think, is very important.
Athar, just to pick on that corroborating evidences, I know when you were reaching out you spoke to government officials for this story and the PRO at the Northern Indian Railways. And I wanted to know, when you're reaching out to government officials for a quote, what is your first step of inquiry? Like, do you physically meet them? Do you email them? Do you call them? And most importantly, how much of the information do you actually reveal about the story when you reach them?
Yeah. The basic, instinct for me is to kind of, do a simple, phone call with the using the optional number. So I think that's the best way to, start the process. So that's what I did. I mean, when I did that particular story, because it was a story wherein the government, the government agency or the department was actually, that was blamed for all that what was happening on ground. So I thought it is better to, find their point of view. What do they think about the issue? So that's how I actually reached out to them, and I was very lucky. I mean, maybe in the second or third attempt, I actually, got through, and I managed to speak with the spokesperson who is actually in charge, and he told me some things which actually, gave some meaty portion to my story. So because that was, coming from the government itself. So that was the strategy which worked for me. But often it doesn't work. I mean, when you try to reach out to the government, it often doesn't. You never. Almost. I would say. I mean, most of the times you don't get the official, perspective. So because it is, because they just want to don't they just don't want to talk to the media people most of the times, especially about such controversial, aspects. So, I mean, if that happens, so what is the next best thing to do? So you write an email, send that and seek a response, write a WhatsApp message also, seek a response, and try to do that again. Send reminders for maybe a couple of days or maybe for a week, maybe 2, 3 reminders. And most of the time is you are convinced that you are not going to get the reply. But at least, when you write in your story that I tried to reach out to the particular department, particular official, so that official or that particular department was not forthcoming with their, response. So as soon as they react to that, to our questions, so we will update the story. So that is, I think, that has become a sort of norm with most of the journalists these days. So that's what I also actually keep doing. I have done it for at least 7, 8 stories in recent months. So that's how, I mean, things work, ultimately, because that actually shifts the blame on the other side. I mean, that you are not blameable at all if you have made every effort to reach out to the government, and it was the government which actually chose not to respond. So I mean, that actually I mean, sets you free. I mean, no one can blame you afterwards. So that's
But
my
are there
strategy.
also, like, when you're reaching out to them, how much of the information are you actually giving out of your story? Or do you just go ahead with the question?
Yeah, I think if it is needed, for example, in this particular, I will again go to this particular story. So I did inform the concerned official that I went to that area. I talked to the people. The people told me this thing, that the railway, Indian Railway has proposed, or at least they have announced this project, and they also carried out some basic survey also. They have installed survey markers also, and giving that kind of information. So I mean, my question to him was, is it correct? And if it is correct, why you are actually why did you feel the need of kind of implementing this project, when the people say that it is something which is absolutely superfluous. I mean, it is not needed at all. So why are you still insisting on that? So is it a defense project? Is it a, I mean, project for the community? So things like that. I mean, sometimes you have to be direct. Otherwise, I mean, you will not simply get an answer if you ask a very basic question and then leave some parts alone. So I think, I mean, in that case, I did reveal information. And see, in some other stories also, when it depends. I mean, it's on a case to case basis. If you feel like the person on or the official on the other side needs to know the context, so I think I mean you should do that, because that will be pretty helpful for the official to kind of come out with his or her response.
Other tied to this question is also, when one looks at your reportage over the years, it's also very interesting to see that the experts that you speak to and all the environment experts that you speak to, how do you reach them? But also, secondly, it's also a question of intent. Is that it's very easy to reach out to think tanks peppered all across the country, but the experts you choose to speak are from Kashmir, or have a connection there, or actually based there. So A, how important it is for you to only reach out to experts like that, and B, how does one build a repertoire of experts to build?
I think speaking to the right person, the right expert, I mean, I think that's very crucial for any story. For example, if I do a story on the decline of glaciers in Kashmir Himalayas, so I think I should seek an expert who has really, who has had the feet on ground, has done carried out some research in the region. I think that my first, preference should be a researcher from from the Kashmir region itself. So that is that is very important for me at least, and I think most of the people will agree with me. Journalists will agree with me that the first expert or the most preferable expert should be one who has who has worked in the region, and who has actually carried out some, who has a body of work in that region. I think that gives your story much credence. So that's one. And like you were asking, is it crucial for the story to have the expert opinion? Yes, indeed. I mean, if you are doing a story on climate science is something very basic, which you should resort to. I mean, you should kind of reach out to a scientist. You should dig out some scientific studies to shore up your arguments in the story, what you are actually basically arguing, or what you are reporting about, or what you are investigating. I think that's very crucial. The experts, especially the experts who have who have worked for quite some time in the region and have published a lot of work also. And also maybe then you have to cross check it with other experts. So that's what I wanted to actually emphasize. I mean, then it's not only one expert you would always rely on. If there is a story, for example, I was talking about the glaciers, if some expert is telling you that the glaciers are melting and also giving some data, then you should actually cross check that data with some other sense also. Do they really corroborate with that? I think you were asking me about your question was about corroborating the evidence. I mean, seeking the opinion of other experts also. I think that's very crucial, especially when you do a story on climate change. I think bringing in other experts also. Maybe sometimes, for example, if you are doing a science story, you are doing a story on a certain study. A study has come up, which is making some revelation, and then you are reporting on that story. I think it is very crucial for you to to reach out to experts who are outside that study, who are not part of that study, to reach out to an expert or two to find to get their perspective on that study, whether that study so that's a sort of peer review which you are doing in a rush. So I think that's how, I mean, it has to be done. That's my personal opinion.
Before we go back to Shreya, quick note to our audiences, please make sure you're using the chat option to bring in your questions and comments and feedbacks. Like I said, we'll be taking them through the course of this discussion. Shreya, I'll come to you now. And one of the most beautiful aspects about your story were the visuals. They're stunning, first and foremost. And I'm trying to understand what was the thought that went behind each composition? Do you separate your reporting days from your photography days? And if you can talk a little bit about the equipment that you're also using.
I mean, I take photos from my phone, so there's nothing separate in that sense. I think it's a situation we all are in this industry right now, where reporters are also, especially independent journalists, are also expected to do all the visual elements that are to be in the story. Um, about like, yeah, I mean, while you're reporting, so usually I interview people and then I take photos because I find it much more, I don't like to interrupt the conversation, so that's how it happens usually. About the thought process behind, I think what, like, once I'm at the desk after I've done my reporting, I think for me it is a very clear understanding of, okay, this has to be said visually versus this can be said textually. And because some things you can't describe, and some things you need to show for it to be an impact, to show an impact, right? For example, the satellite imagery that's in my Gujarat story, which shows the scale of demolitions, right? Because while I was there, there was nothing much left to photograph, really. It was just a plain intertidal area in that sense, because all the houses have been demolished, right? So I was thinking that how do I show people that this used to be an area where so many people lived? And that was the challenge, so there was another researcher who had gone to that area before the demolition. So she had some photos, but it didn't work out. Like, she didn't send it to me on time, which is what I hoped I would include, because it really shows, right, like what it used to be versus what it is now. That's what I really wanted to show. um with the second story, even that is a lot visually led, but in there the purpose was to show, because a lot of it is technicalities of scale and measurement and things like that, but how do you show it in a very clear way, that what does it look like, right? Because these are all uh, things that are so it was like you're zooming in and zooming out of the situation. You're talking about people's lives at a very day-to-day level, which is the world we live in, right? Where we don't look at the world from a map. We don't look at the world from satellites. We look at it from our eyes at an eye level while we are on the ground. And that's the reality for most people. But a lot of the policies are made from the satellite imagery, right? And that visual is what most of the policymakers, most of the people implementing policies see. So for me, the purpose was that to bridge that gap, right? And show really what that gap means to people's lives in the end, and people's livelihoods. So I think each visual has to be driven by a purpose. And yeah.
Also, for the benefit of our audiences, Shreya did a text story for Mongaway, but also did a complete visual story. It's highly interactive, and you can see the parts of the geography that she's been at, and what like she talked about seeing it with your eyes versus seeing it on map. They're two different realities altogether, and policymakers would probably go with the reality that's based on map, which may or may not be accurate while on ground. But Shreya, another element of your story was when you are, the even when you are there, you're using Google Maps and you're writing textually with Google Maps, because the communities that live there no longer have those houses that Google Maps shows.
Hmm.
And the other part is obviously this visual-led story that you've done. You can also take us through the nuts and bolts behind the scenes of what goes on. But talk to us about, textually writing through Google Map and not visually writing.
Yeah, so actually that sparked because the one of the locations I was going to, Meetha Port, I went there like literally few weeks after the demolition. And I was just trying to understand the geography of that area. So I was looking at Google Maps while I was on the field. And I realized that it had not updated. It still showed the houses. And I was like, clearly that like there is a digital reality that exists which is not matching the current reality of the location, right? So that fascinated me, and I thought it really shows uh that, like, if a reader has to have some kind of connection to that area right now, all they can do is look at Google Earth or Google Maps and see what that area looks like, but that is not reality, right? And that I thought I had to write it, because I think that really shows how quickly these things change also, right? And how, like like a whole community that existed is virtually displaced and erased in a way. And I thought that really shows, like, just that statement really shows that. So I wrote that. Yeah.
I have a question for both of you, whoever wants to go first with this. And I also struggle with it because once the reporting is done, the harder problem begins. Now you have to write it. And each time I write, my drafts run into like 3,000 words for a 800-word story. Everything feels essential. Each paragraph has to pass a test. And the test is that, is it really revealing or answering a question? Was it serving a purpose? How does that judgment look like for you now that you're in your desk writing the story? How do you grapple with this process?
Arthur, do you want to go first?
Okay. So, I mean, there is not any hard and fast, solution for this, but I think uh, something which I always try is the human body metaphor. For example, in our body, we have the skeleton, we have the muscles or the flesh, and then we have the skin. So I think, I mean, if we, use that metaphor and break the story in that, kind of order, or, in that way, I think the first thing which we should, I mean, all of them are very important, but I think maybe if we can begin with the skeleton, because, it is something which our body stands on. So that's how, the information, the very basic of everything, I know, like 5 Ws, who, where, what, when, where, and why. I think all of those things should get addressed in the skeleton, at least to the basic extent, the very basics. That's the very basic thing which one must, a reporter must, address to. And then move on, like kind of fine tuning it. When it comes to fine tuning, so that's when we talk about the flesh or the muscles, how to, kind of add muscle to the story, or, muscle to your body, the basic protein, the protein which you thrive on. So that is your data. That's where your best quotes come in. The most, attractive quotes from your interview, those who you have interviewed, and maybe the data, what kind of, good data you have, and what kind of good anecdotes, if not anecdotes, but good case studies. I think if you have a good case study, if you are doing a story on a farmer, struggling with the impacts of climate change in a particular way, so how he has suffered over the years, what is his position, what is his, how is his family suffering because of it. So that is the case study for you. I'm just quoting an example. So that will be the muscle part or the flesh part. And then I think again very important is the skin. Our body is, skeleton, flesh, and skin. The skin is, it actually decides, decides your headline. It actually, gives the reader the sense, of the story, and it that touch. I mean, it contains, or the beauty it has. So I think the skin should decide that whether you have everything addressed in your story, how beautiful it is, how stylishly your these sentences are, you have praised them, and how attractive you have made it, so that actually tells the reader, or makes the reader to stay in the story, keep reading the story. So, I mean, if when you are convinced that my story has all these aspects, it has the skeleton, it has the flesh, it has the beautiful skin. So I think that's when you should feel that you are done. So that's my basic, formula. And when it comes to, the climate change stories, I think most often, the journalists, I think all of us, I must have also done it in the past. So we actually, put climate change in a, broader frame. I mean, we put it as a broader problem. Most of the time is maybe I'm not doing it anymore, but I must have also done it. So I mean, that is not something which is ideal. So I think what is basically, giving a human face to the story is very important. I think if you have that human face in your story, if you are connecting it with the lived experiences, I think you should, like, most of the time is you should actually see to it that you have connected your story with the lived experiences, or you have a human face in your story. I think that is the most crucial for me, which I have learned over the years.
Lovely. The human body metaphor is amazing. I'm going to take that. Shreya, what has your experience been like now that the reporting is done?
So once I'm done with reporting, there are things that stay with you always, right? And uh, I feel that most often I end up starting my story with, say, so I would also give this as a caveat that I have mostly just written long form in my career. So most of my stories are 3,000 words. So I don't generally face that challenge of trying to make it 800. If you asked me to write an 800-word story, I would be a bit stumped. I wouldn't know how to do it. But other than like things that stay with me, which always finds a prominent place in the story, what I do is create a mind map where I start with the crux of the story and create like aspects which I really want to cover that or that's the story should have, right? Like there is the central angle, but there are these supplementary angles that go together to create the larger story. So I start with the mind map, then I work with the head. So I think writing the headline is a one-day process for me most often. So I sit and think and think and think, like, what is one thing that I want to say through this story? Because even though what I write is not the final headline that the story goes with, the editors always choose the headline, but it helps me center myself and have that statement, or sometimes even I write the nutcraft big in the beginning, and that gives like a center point, like an anchor to the story, and everything you write has to work with that or contradict that also sometimes, but yeah, but that is the focus that drives the story.
Lovely. I think headline is a one-day process for sure. No, Eliza asked on the chat, and I also had this question. I couldn't resist asking. What is your opinion of journalists using AI, and do you think it has helped you in some ways?
I mean, the only AI I use is a transcription software uh for interviews, but other than that, not really.
Athar, do you have any thoughts here with AI?
Yeah, I think I will go with Shreya on that. I think that is, that's a fair game if you, use it to that extent. And you should always, make it an effort to kind of do most of the work yourself. But sometimes, I mean, it is again a fair game if you genuinely feel benefited, find yourself benefited by using AI, and you are very honest in that, and it is not actually influencing your kind of, your reportage in a bad way. I think, I mean, to that extent, I'm okay with that, and everyone should be okay with that, because we are living in an era where this is going to, I mean, it has already superimposed itself on us. So we can't get away from it, from it, like, it is going to be there for long.
Arthur, do you in your practice have incorporated AI?
Uh, I have done transcriptions of a lot of interviews, especially after I, attended that workshop. So I think that was, quite helpful. After that, before that, I also, did it to some extent. But after I actually, got some clues while attending that workshop, I think I have done it, several times, especially, for transcripting the intros.
Hmm. Hmm.
In my own language, it doesn't help that much. But if it is in, any other language, if it's even in Urdu, I think it does help. Hindi, it always does, and English, I mean, that's already there. So I think, I mean, to that extent, it's quite, useful.
I would like to add one thing here is that what I've found challenging since the AI situation is that the search engines have become so bad that a lot of the time I mean I've not used AI, but I don't know how to search anymore because the search results are so bad, and like research really requires me to like dig deeper. So I think it does take me more time because I have to be much more I have to spend much more time figuring out the search situation. But yeah.
Yeah, it's true that the search algo has completely gone for a toss. With this, we'll have to say goodbye to Athar. Athar is in the middle of an emergency, so thank you so much again, Athar, for taking time out.
Thank you.
Appreciate you staying with us.
Thank you. Many thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Take care of that.
Take care.
Shreya, I'll also come to you with my question of pitching. And now you've been in the business for so long, so I'm sure you know the process really, really well. This was also your first time pitching to Mongabay. If you could also talk to us about the process of, each publication, how do you make sure that this is a story, that this is the publication that's right for me, and this is exactly how I'm going to pitch it?
Hmm. So, I mean, Article 14, I work with them a lot. So it's an organization and it's an editorial team that I'm comfortable working with. So for me, there are multiple factors to consider. Is how much, because certain stories I want to undergo like a specific level of scrutiny and a specific level of editorial fact checking and the process of it. So that is one aspect which I really consider when I'm pitching. With Mongabay, what happened was I really wanted the story to have this multimedia element, because otherwise it really wouldn't. I think it would be a much difficult process of explaining this whole situation to people, right? So Mahima, who's another resident who routinely writes for Mongabay, told me that they're looking for more, multimedia storytelling. So that's how I started. That's how I decided to pitch to Mongabay. So I think with each story, you kind of know that okay, this is a story that this organization would be interested in, might be interested in, because a lot of independent media publications are so niche now. So, yeah, it's a combination of how much, how much editorial support I want, what kind of story would work for different with specific organization, and also like the scope of the story that I want it to be. So these are the aspects which help me choose the publication. Also, sometimes you have to have 3, 4 publications uh, shortlisted because one might reject, so you have to go with the next. And yeah, it's a process. Somehow
Hmm.
it lands, yeah.
So is the writing process also different for?
Yes, yes, it absolutely is, because that's what I said. So Article 14, because Samar is someone I have worked with at India Spend while I was a staff reporter there. So I know what kind of what kind of language, what kind of you are somewhat familiar with their style sheet. Mongabay, I did struggle a bit with the process because it's the first time I was not familiar with their style sheet. And but these are things, it's not that big a deal. You write it and then that's what the edit process is. Also, I feel with freelancers, it's of course with staff reporters they expect you to uh follow the style sheet to the T. But sometimes if you're a freelancer, you try. And Mongabay is also quite professional in that sense that they did give me a complete style guide and how the story should look like, what all it should include, etc., etc. So it was easy that way. But with each publication, that's a process as well.
I think Eliza has a question wherein they're asking, can you please share how to negotiate the fees with editors?
So this is always tricky. Certain publications are very openly saying that they don't pay freelancers. So I mean, it's not a good industry right now. So, but then there are certain organizations like Article 14 which are very particular about paying you on time. The day the story gets published, they pay you. In other publications, even if they say they pay you, they might take months and months. So there is also there are freelance journalist groups where a lot of these discussions happen about which organization, what are they doing. If someone has had a bad experience, they share it there. I think these kind of informal networks is the only way to um, get a clear picture of the situation right now. So a lot of freelancers rely on things like that. So if a publication is not paying, but then there are certain situations where you have funding, like you have a grant, you have some kind of reporting expenses covered, you have and then you might want to publish with an organization that doesn't pay, but I wouldn't recommend it. But these are discussions and decisions each person has to take at each story that they're doing and what works for them. And many times, this time I have just started freelancing, but last time when I was freelancing for 3 years, I would it was a very there were some stories which I had to do, which were kind of a loss for me because I would get paid like 10,000 rupees, but I have spent maybe 1 or 2 months on it, right? So it doesn't work financially for me, but it's a story that I really want to do, and uh, it's something because at the same time I might have something else which is paying me much more. So a lot of freelancing ends up being this, unfortunately, is this balancing of what you want to do versus what you are getting paid for versus which organization is also like another aspect that is important to me is which organization is easy to work with, right? Sometimes I might choose an organization that pays less if the process is smoother, which is none of these situations are ideal, but practically this is what ends up happening.
I think we can also take this one wherein has there been any evidence, or have heard where a story had to be withdrawn because you said the ethos that you weren't working in didn't work out?
Oh, yeah, many of my stories that I've written have not seen light of day. Uh, it's just sitting in the black hole of dead stories. Because the thing is, a lot of the time it also becomes irrelevant because time has passed, people have sat on it for a long time, weeks have gone, and if I have to revive that story, I have to practically do the entire process again, do reporting again. So unless there is something that, you know, maybe something has to come up, maybe a new, uh, like it's something, an update in the situation, or maybe some grant or some kind of a momentum to come back to that story. Until that happens, it just stays there, unfortunately. At least I can count like 10 stories maybe, which are just, yeah, I've written but not going to be
Not
published.
seeing the film. Okay. Okay, we understand that. I think Priya Darshini Basu has a question on hitting a roadblock while researching for a story
Mm.
and when to know if it's a good time to move on.
I mean, I think with this, there is a process. So what usually happens is you're working on a story, but there are stories on the back burner, uh, which are just there. We are not actively working on it, but you're keeping like somewhat of a track of it, right? So a lot of the time, that's what happens. For example, this fishing story, also the coastal story. Like I said, since Jan 2025, I have been speaking to people, doing some research here and there, and it develops over time because you try, because a lot of the time you also want to find an angle that's new, right? You don't want to just write what everyone has already written about. And publications also don't want to publish something that everyone's already covered. So finding that new angle sometimes does take time. And about the research process, I think it's a constant process. I don't think it starts somewhere and ends somewhere else. But I am doing research even before the story is a story, because okay, this is something that interests me or this seems interesting. Even the scale story happened because India's coastline increased from 7,500 to 11,000 kilometer. And I was like, that's just absurd to me, right? How can it's like a 50% increase. Um, so that's where the story began, and that I don't think really finds mention in the story at all, really. But it starts with something small like that, and then you dig deeper, deeper, deeper. Until the day you're writing your draft, you're doing some kind of research. So I think it's a process, it's a continuous, ongoing process.
Hmm. I think we don't have any more questions from the audiences. Mm. Shreya, if you can just quickly tell us a little. Okay, I think we have a question now. Mm. How do you share your stories across social media platforms to get more traction?
I am bad at this, honestly. uh, I do feel that a lot of my stories are not very um popularly read, I would say. It is a very niche stories, right? So I also don't know who's reading my stories. But for me, there are some stories that, of course, like the Bastar encounter story that I did, is the kind of story which you do, which I can promote on social media because it's something that's immediate. For example, like the demolition story, we did a reel about it. And there are certain stories like that which is very easily, how to promote on social media. What there is an urgency to it, there is a timeliness to it, there is a emotional uh, you know, element to it, which is what a lot of social media coverages emerge to be. So a lot of the times, those kind of stories, it comes naturally to me. So I might do a thread or a reel or something, or like a Instagram post, but I am bad at it. So I don't think you should listen to me about this. Um, but like a story like the Mongabe one, which is about a technical aspect in a way the policy is being designed and implemented, I'm also not sure how exactly I'm going to promote. So it's something I'm also thinking of right now, but I don't think uh, I don't think there is a good way to make it viral or any of the. I don't think the story is that. So I think it depends on the story. And about the environment, I don't think all environment stories are like that. There are some kind of stories. I think heat stories, for example, always do well. There is a sort of visceral, uh, shared understanding amongst everyone what heat is and what it looks like, what it feels like. So I think those kind of stories end up being very well read. But uh, the stories which are more about the CRZ notification and its intricacies, I don't know if there is a way to, yeah, if you know anyway, then please tell me. I'll do it.
No, I also think like with regards to reaching the right audiences, social media is one way, but like you said, you don't know who ends up reading your story. I think even with my experience, it has been you never know who reads your story because some people actually do. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they reach out to you through social media platforms, but through other ways as well.
Yeah, yeah. So like a lot of this happens when I'm going for like some conference or some workshop or something. Someone will talk about a story that I've done, and I didn't think people were reading it also.
Mhm.
So it does happen. Yeah. And I think it's also, for me, it's the idea that it exists out in the world, which is more important to me than who's reading the day it got published. I don't know if that's for me as important as the information being out there in a specific way with a specific thought process, which is what I think is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shreya. With this, we are at time. Thank you, Shreya, for taking the time to speak with us. And thank you to our lovely audiences for staying with us through the course of this discussion.